Hi everyone, I show 1 o'clock on my phone, so we will go ahead and get started. We still have a few people, it looks like, coming in, but I'm going to start off here with an intro and some housekeeping anyway, so hopefully they won't miss much. You are all muted due to the number of people in the presentation, so to ask questions or make comments, please do that in the chat. I am Pete Amborn, director here of the the networking group. There's a little typo there at DWD, and we also have a software side. So some of you are familiar with Chris. I know some of the people in the webinar that signed up are also software clients, or only software clients. Also on with us, but kind of behind the scenes, is Jordan Ehrman. He's manager here at DWD. And I think Jordan told me a little bit before the presentation, he's going on 8 years. That has flown by. I'm going on 10, so a little bit more. Also in the background is Leah. If you're having connection issues at any point, so if you can hear me but not see the slides, for example, you can give her a call at 260-399-8649. Or if something happens during the presentation and you need to reach out, feel free to reach out to Leah. She is there to help. With that being said, I think we'll go ahead and jump into the rest of it. So what does DWD Technology Group, specifically the networking side, do? We do all kinds of fun stuff. Obviously, break fix, typical stuff that if you've been in business for 10, 15, 20 years, if you had a problem, you called someone, that would have been us, and we handled it. More currently, some fancier names have come about, like managed services or managed IT. We do that as well. That's actually become a big part of our business. More recently, IT security or managed security. We also do a lot with business continuity, which has gone through a bunch of name changes, disaster recovery, backup. This is just the newest, latest, and greatest. So we do handle that. I've kind of lumped some other things all in that fourth category there: virtualization, wireless storage area networks. If you're not sure, feel free to ask. Most likely we do it. And the last one there is even broader, all things 365. So SharePoint, OneDrive, 365 standard, enterprise, any of those levels, in addition to Azure and all things Azure, we do that as well. So we kind of do a little bit of everything. For today's webinar, though, strictly security in this fancy term, security stack. Here's the definition, sort of, that I pulled offline. And the only part I added there were processes. So it's pretty much anything that you're doing to protect yourself. Security tools, technologies, and processes. So that means your operating procedures, how you handle people, how people handle incidents as they come up, all of that to protect or react to attacks on your information and assets. So that's what a security stack is. I'm going to go through, and at the very end, which I know a lot of people don't do, I typically haven't done, I'm going to even give you a recommendation in order, like highest to least, of what I feel should be in a security stack. I'll give you 2 levels of that, a kind of intro, here are your basics, and then one that's a little bit more involved and obviously a little bit more expensive, which is a level 2. And to talk about security stacks, we'll go through several areas here. One of them, a term that you're going to see a whole bunch of times, is EDR, endpoint detect and response. Jordan, if you'll pull up our poll for today, and we only have one, and it's probably the simplest poll you'll ever see. It only has a yes or a no. And as I was going through this just last night, I thought we probably should have had an I don't know. If you're not sure, please answer no. Because if you're not sure, chances are you don't. Or you have a very limited, maybe just on your servers. So if you could take just a minute or a few seconds there. Does your company typically use endpoint detect and response? And if you have heard of SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or are using those are the 2 biggies in the EDR field. So we'll give you just a few more seconds. And Jordan, can you pull that up? Let's see how people have answered. There we go. So not surprising. This is a trend. If you've had to fill out a cybersecurity questionnaire for an insurance policy recently, you probably have seen EDR referenced in there. I can tell you for a fact that it has moved over the last year and a half, 2 years, because I review a bunch of policy applications for people. It has moved from a do you have one to what is your EDR? Strongly suggesting you better have one in order to get coverage, or at least not pay crazy amounts of money for your coverage. So thanks, Jordan. If you want to pull that off, that would be great. That actually was a little bit wider gap than I anticipated. I knew it would be more no's, but yeah, that's huge. So to get to your security stack, though, for your company, here are the 5 levels or areas that I'm going to go through. First of all, identify what we're protecting, how we actually do the protecting, then detecting to know, are we actually protected or not? Or in the odd case that something gets through, how do we respond if something gets through? I hate to say when, but as with most people, as good as you are, there's a chance something could get through someday. And if they do, and something bad happens, what do you do to recover? So all crucial areas. Once you go through these, then it kind of makes it more obvious what your stack should look like. So on the identify, this is hugely important because I see so many people that come and say, what do we need to have here for security? And you really can't answer that until you have a really good idea of what are you protecting. And almost as important as what are you protecting is where is it? Is it local? I started probably 25, 30 years ago in IT, and at that time it was pretty straightforward. A company had an office somewhere and they had some kind of firewall and a server, and that was it. There were very few laptops or laptops allowed, nothing left that. So pretty simple. Obviously things are way different these days. I would bet pretty much everybody on this call has staff, or you yourselves have a laptop that leave the physical premises of your company. You also probably do something in the cloud. I'm betting probably 70, 80% of the people on the webinar today are 365 users. So just that alone means you have stuff out in the cloud. So knowing what you're protecting and where it is are huge, and document it because it's going to change. And this is a really nice thing to review year after year. You can include it as part of your cyber insurance documents that they're requiring more and more now, like disaster recovery form and other forms that they have. What do we do to protect? So this would be awesome if this was the last slide. If we could just say, hey, put these things in place and you will never have an event. Obviously, no one's going to guarantee that. It can't happen. Even with the best of intentions, sometimes something happens. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's a person that clicks on something, maybe an email that lets it in, but even the best of protection, you can spend all the money in the world, that there's going to be at least a small gap somewhere. Here are the things, though, that have the biggest impact when it comes to cybersecurity. And these are in pretty much the same order you're going to see later when I mention what should be in your stack. So no big surprise when we get to that later. They'll pretty much be in this order. A good firewall. And it's not just a firewall, but a good firewall. Endpoint detect and response. I'm including in this line antivirus, anti-malware. I'm guessing that everyone that said no in the poll is running some kind of antivirus, anti-malware, and up until recently, that's been plenty. But now everybody's moving to this EDR, endpoint detect and response. So just so you are perfectly aware, EDR is pretty much replacing AV/AM. The third one down, multi-factor authentication, anywhere and everywhere. I know pretty much everybody hates it, but it is a must. In some cases, it's your last form of defense against password breaches. The next one down is mail filtering. If you're on 365, you're already doing this. So mail filtering, although very important, hugely important, pretty much everyone's already doing it in some form. So it's just whether or not you want to boost that up a level or not. Your OS security is your operating system security. You'll notice that every once in a while you'll get something from whoever your IT group is, or maybe it's an email if your IT person is internal, saying that this version of Windows is no longer supported, it's end of life, we're not going to do any patches for it. So making sure that your operating systems, servers, and workstations are all up to date and patched current is hugely important. Security awareness training. Again, I go back to the people sometimes are the weakest link. Security awareness training is one way to bolster that. I'll dig into more details about that later. Device management and patch management kind of go with OS security, but I did list them here as a separate thing. Mobile device management sometimes is a big deal if you have people that do a lot on cell phones, which more and more companies do. Device management should also be in your considerations for how to protect yourself and your data. So we'll move on to the tech stage. And I just wanted to remind everybody, if you have questions, if you're jotting things down on your own or whatever, feel free to ask them during the webinar. Jordan will answer some things if he can, and other things we may be able to get to at the end, although you can tell I'm going kind of fast because I have a lot to cover. And we will respond to everything. So even if it ends up having to be an email later, we will get to them. So don't hesitate to insert your questions here in the chat. Just a reminder. So on to the detect. So you've done the first two, you've identified what you want to protect, you put your protections in place. Okay, let's make sure it's actually working. So we need to detect if something has gotten through. The areas listed there, pretty much the same thing as before. There are a couple, one different entry there, which is dark web monitoring, but the other ones are all the same. So your firewall can detect when there are issues, hopefully. Your EDR, antivirus and malware, should be alerting you. Your OS security, if you're having your servers and workstations remotely monitored and managed, you should be getting alerts if those patches aren't getting applied, if something's falling too far behind, or in worst cases, something was rolled back by the bad guys perhaps. Multi-factor authentication can alert you. We've had people, it's happened to me, where I've been out on a Friday night and my phone goes off asking me to okay access to something that I obviously didn't just try to get into. So it's alerting me to the fact, not a ton I can do with that information, but just the fact that somebody is making an attempt, a lot of times will just make me want to go change a password just to be super safe. And people have to report things that they see as suspicious. That's a big deal. When I talk about security awareness training later, that's kind of a part of it as well. And it should be a part of your documentation as well. Where do people go? Who do they tell if they think something is not quite right? The new one here is dark web monitoring, and there are services, some people include that. I know KnowBe4 as part of their security awareness training will include some dark web monitoring. Basically, that's telling you if your company or employees of your company are being mentioned on the dark web. So for example, if somebody has a bunch of passwords for sale, and some of your staff are included in that, you could get some advanced warning. If someone's saying they have data on your company, you get a little bit of advanced warning, although in that case, you probably are already aware of it because the bad guys are trying to ransom you. But dark web monitoring is something that's becoming more and more prevalent. I know of at least one company I talked to where the FBI approached them and told them they were being mentioned on the dark web before they ever even were aware that anybody was in their network. So can be very important, can be a nice tool, not super expensive. Onto the response. So I know these are getting scarier as we move down through here. Like I said, it would have been awesome if the protect slide was the last one, but this is real world, so we'll run with it. What happens if something bad gets through and you've detected it, you know it's there, how are you going to respond? This should be mapped out ahead of time. So disaster recovery and response plan, which a lot of cyber insurance places are asking if you have one, the time will come where they will ask to see it. They're not just going to take your word for it, and they may even evaluate it. Who knows? But if you don't have one, it's obviously a really good form to have in place anyway. And it's what are people going to do if they see something or something looks bad? They come in and their workstation has a note that says your files are all encrypted. you need to contact us with some Bitcoin. That's a super obvious one. But what if a user clicked on a fire or something on an email they thought was legit? It said their Microsoft 365 password was about to expire. Once they clicked on it, though, they realized, ooh, this was not right. Are they going to report that to somebody? Hopefully. And who are they going to report it to? So obviously, we encourage people to do that. It's not something a lot of people want to admit to, but you see the fourth item down there is people. That's huge on the response. You're counting on them. There was at least one company I spoke to where somebody had clicked on something, didn't report it, later got phone calls from the bad guys, didn't report it, they were too embarrassed, and later enough time had gone by where the bad guys actually published data they had taken from them on the dark web just because of that. So we absolutely want to encourage it. Encourage people not to click, but if you accidentally do, let someone know about it. But as far as response goes, you can also get information from other sources. Your firewall can give you events to look at. Your EDR, antivirus, anti-malware, you're probably aware of because that'll pop up and list things that they have quarantined. EDR is a little bit more complicated. You need some things pre-programmed into that. Security Operations Center as a service, that's the next to last item. So SOC as a service is a really nice one. Teams of people that are experts in a certain area can monitor 24/7 and alert you to things that are of super high importance. Same thing with endpoint detect and response. There are companies that will have a security center in place, so they call it managed EDR. So you have people that do this full time, really know what they're talking about, experts in the field, looking at your thousands and thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of events weekly and pulling out the ones that are need additional attention. We use such a service here with our FortiGate firewalls. We have SOC as a service. And just to give you an idea, I'm not exaggerating on the numbers, they showed us how many events are being kicked up, which we can see on our FortiGate. And it was in the tens of thousands for a month. And over 4 months, I think only twice have they raised their hand and said, hey, you guys need to look at these two things. And both cases, it had to do with log files starting to fill up. So it ended up being just medium priority, something we wanted to deal with, but it wasn't, hey, an attack had gotten through. But what a great thing to have a team of experts at your beck and call and watching your back. Because if you didn't know already, the bad guys are not idiots. They attack at night, on the weekends, on holidays. All of those things are huge. Okay, last item here is recovery. And again, like I said, sorry to go bad to worse, but let's say they got through, they actually did a bunch of damage, they encrypted your server. Let's say you have a single server, they've encrypted it, they let you know that they will give you the key for a certain amount of money. How are you going to recover from that? 2 items down there, this boils down to, I could probably add a third, but for now we'll just leave it at those, is what kind of backup do you have in place? Or are you a little bit better off and you have like a full disaster recovery? Or you're, in best case scenario, you have business continuity. You can actually spin up a virtual copy of the server from the night before and you're right back in business. So I can talk in more detail about that if anybody's interested. Datto is our business continuity that we use right now. We use it internally. We have a ton of clients on that. But it does give you a lot of peace of mind. Where it doesn't help is if before encrypting your data, they actually made a copy of it. And that is happening more and more. So the bad guys were smart. They figured out people are getting better at the backup, disaster recovery, business continuity. They're just ignoring us. So, okay, we got to threaten something that they can't just restore to. And that is, we have your data and we're going to publish it. And they are, if you haven't heard, they're absolutely serious about it. They will do it. I've worked with at least one business where they did it. They carried through and posted it. They didn't have any sensitive data, so it ended up not being a big deal. You'd have to kind of go through and do an audit of your company and figure out, okay, if they got this set of folders, how bad would it be? Because it's one thing to say you can recover and restore your backups, but it's another thing to say, we don't want this published. This would be really bad for us. And that's where the second item there, notification of breach, comes in. You may be under some kind of compliance requirements, just in general, basic business requirements. I'm sure you have clients that don't want to get notified that you had personal data of theirs that are now out on the dark web. So your recovery depends on your security stack as far as the backup, disaster recovery, business continuity, and obviously as far as your detect and response part of this as well. And I'll go over that as we talk about levels here. All right, cool. So we're right on schedule. We have about 10 minutes to go. I'll try to leave a few minutes for questions to see how many we have or if we have any. But I did think this was important enough to talk about. So what do we recommend? Here's level one, and you'll notice I'm intentionally leaving specific product names out of this and services for now. My last slide, or next to the last slide, no, I think it is the last slide, I will list those. I didn't want this to seem super salesy, so I wanted to show it in generalities instead. But these are absolutely in order. Is number one, if it were my business, I have a small, mid, whatever size business, here's what I would put in place. EDR is number one. Like I said, most companies are going to have to, if you don't already have cyber insurance, and whether you have it now or you're going to be looking for it shortly, like it or not, EDR, endpoint detect and response, is going to be a requirement. Not only that, but the last few I've seen is they said you better have EDR on everything, and we want proof. So what are you doing to make sure as devices are added that EDR is installed? The good news is it's not crazy expensive. It's not much more than antivirus, anti-malware, and it's a fantastic product. Great to have in place. Number two is the firewall. Having a strong firewall, not provided by your ISP, so not Xfinity, not Frontier. You want your own firewall where you can set your own rules and modify it, or have your IT group or person set those, is a must. Number three is multi-factor on everything. And the only reason that's number three is because not everybody uses stuff that can even make use of multi-factor. But if you can, put it on everything. Again, it stinks. It's a sad state that we're in, that we have to do this, but it's just a fact. We have to do it. So especially if you're on 365, if you have people that have a VPN into your network, make sure those are on MFA, and make sure you have something in place that checks to make sure it's not bypassed. So we check that here. I think it's quarterly. We go through the list to make sure no one's in bypass mode. There are simpler solutions out there than it used to be. So it used to be everything had to be a text. You got a code. You have to remember the code. You have to enter that on the computer. Then you get in. Nowadays, if you use something like a Duo, it's just a yes/no question. Is this you? Yes, I want to get in. Number four is the business continuity. I'm not even going to put disaster recovery back up there. I think business continuity is important enough now. You need to be able to recover pretty quick. Number five, mail filtering. Again, this is very, very important, but it's far down on my list because 95% of people are already using this. If you're on 365, you're using it. You may need to tweak it, so you may need to get with somebody to find out if you have it set correctly, but you have it in place. And number six is security awareness training. If the budget's tight, if you spent a bunch of your money on 1, 2, 3, and 4 above, you still need to do this, but there is a way you can do it yourself. There are tons of resources online. You just have to be intentional, and you have to be consistent. Whenever a new employee comes in, they get run through the security awareness training, whatever yours might look like, warned, threatened, whatever, to not click on stuff, to only open stuff. Here's what emails from outside the company look like. Internally, processes. No one is ever going to ask you to go out and buy cards. No one is ever going to ask you to change banking routing information. If they do, here's who you go to, that kind of thing. You can do security awareness training without making it a formal process. As cheap as it is to do formally, I would recommend that. But if you can't do that, you can absolutely do it yourself. Be more than happy to send you some resources if you wanted to reach out. There's plenty of good stuff out there where you can do that yourself. Again, you have to know yourself. If you're going to be consistent with it, then that's great. If you know that's just not really one of your strengths or your company's strengths, then absolutely pay a few bucks a year to have something in place to do it. So that's level 1. Here's level 2, and I only have 2. Pretty much the same order, it's just the flavor has changed a little bit. So instead of number 1 just being EDR, I would have a managed EDR, because even if you have endpoint detect and response, and we have plenty of people on SentinelOne, ourselves included, and we have it pre-programmed with some items of, hey, if this happens, consider it high priority and cut this machine off from the network. If this happens, it's medium priority, just notify someone. Again, unless you have a good sized staff, a good sized support group for IT, you could get overwhelmed with the number of events and notifications. So just be careful with that. A managed team is always better. Number 2, instead of just having a strong firewall, have a security operations center as a service added to it. Surprisingly, not that expensive. I was shocked when I saw how much it was. I was waiting for our trial to end or something, but we've been with FortiGate now a little over a year, or close to it, and everything has been fantastic. We love it. I can't speak for other vendors, but at least for them, I know it's great. And again, attacks happen during weird times. So unless you have a team of people that are giving you 24/7 response on their own, this is absolutely a nice service to have. Number 3 is the same thing, MFA, that didn't really change. Number 4, business continuity, same thing. Number 5, mail filtering, same thing. Number 6, this does change a little bit. Security awareness training, something like a know before. I should have put that in there, something like, I don't want this to make it look like they are the only player in town. There are other people that do this. They are just the biggest one. And they get incredible reviews. Not that expensive at all. I think it's like $1 or $2 a user a month. Very, very inexpensive. The pushback we get on security awareness training, surprisingly, isn't even the price. A lot of times people think it's going to be complicated. It's really not. I know we do it. I'm sure other providers do it, where we can set a company up for the entire year in about an hour, maybe hour and a half. Jordan's on here now, so if he, if that's way out of line, correct me. But Jordan actually does this for different companies, gotten very good at it. But you set up your campaigns ahead of time, and you can set them up for the entire year. And campaigns are fake phishing emails that go out to your staff to try to get them to click on things that they shouldn't. And if they do, it trains them. Here's why you shouldn't have clicked on this. Here are things to look out for. It'll point them to videos, perhaps like a minute, 2 minutes long, nothing crazy, on how to get better at spotting bad emails. But it's a great service, super easy to use. And they actually, I believe, also offer some dark web monitoring. I'm not sure how intense that is yet. We're just kind of experimenting with it, but just to give you an idea. And we have just a couple minutes left. So I did mention this as part of what I'd present today. I won't go over all this because it would take me too long, but AI, I initially was going to set this out to show the pros of it. Like SentinelOne, the endpoint detect and response product or service that I've been mentioning quite a bit, uses AI. That's why it's so much better than antivirus, anti-malware. So antivirus, anti-malware basically looks at files and compares them to a blacklist. If they're on there, then it blocks it or quarantines it. So you can see where it's always a responsive product. The bad guys come out with something new, the blacklists have to be identified and updated, and then that way you're good to try to block stuff. And that's always a catching up process. Whereas with EDR, it has AI that looks at things like, well, this person doesn't normally do this at this time of night. This person doesn't normally access this folder on the server. This amount of traffic in and out of this workstation over a 20-minute period is really odd. It learns as it goes, learns your habits, gets better, and can do some really nice things like automatic rollback. It's a very, very impressive product. Voice duplication, I'll skip. Collecting knowledge and data poisoning, these are all ways. If I had more time, I could go into it, but all in all, be afraid because the AI is making the bad guys better. The number one, which I kind of skipped over there, are the realistic phishing emails. Instead of being able to very easily spot bad grammar, somebody using a different voice in an email than you would expect. My dad sent me an email last week where it was totally obvious he had used AI to help him, which was kind of cool to see my dad using something like that. but at the same time, it was way out of whack. It was super professional, but way different than any kind of voice he would use in a typical email to me. These are going to get better and better. They're going to actually insert themselves into somebody's email when they hack it. They're going to sit there and watch for a while and learn. So when they reach out as your person that normally does AR, AP, and they ask you to change some things, it's going to sound like the other person at the other end. So these are just going to get better and better. And our defenses will get better and better. That's the good news. So I did promise, here are some examples. I know I'm out of time here. So here are some examples of what we use. Antivirus, anti-malware is Bitdefender. And I will throw in there, Bitdefender does have an EDR flavor now as well. So just because it's Bitdefender does not mean it's old school. You could be on the newer EDR version. We don't have anyone on that. Anyone that's on Bitdefender with us right now is still on their antivirus, anti-malware. For our EDR platform, we went with Sentinel-1. So people that we have on endpoint detect and response are running Sentinel-1. Our firewalls, we moved away from Cisco. We do still support them. We have a number of them out in our fleet, but the bulk of ours now are FortiGates. We just love their firewalls, the direction they're going, and their SOC as a service that they now offer, which is awesome. Our MFA product that we use that's pretty universal. There aren't many things that won't work with it is Duo. Our business continuity is Datto. Our mail filtering, as I said before, 365, you probably already have that built in. If you want something that's a little bit easier to work with, Mail Protector is one that we recommend and use. And the last one there is our security awareness training. I already told you about that one, is KnowBe4. So if you want any information on any of these specifically, or just in general on some of these solutions, reach out. We'll see, Jordan. I don't mind hanging on a little bit. If you need to drop off, anybody else that's attending, keep in mind if you posted anything in the chat for a question, we will get back to you. I believe Sherry said she'll be sending out a recording of the presentation. So either with that or slightly after, we'll get back to you to answer your questions. So don't feel like you have to hang on, but if you want to hang on here for a few minutes, Jordan, do we have any questions that came in?
Junior asks, is there a template or guide for creating a response plan/policy?
Great question. Yes, I have some. I wouldn't say it's the guide, but it's a guide to get you started. I will put a little disclaimer on it. So when I send out that template, some people come back and are surprised, like, there's just not much here. A lot of those are on you. So you have to answer a lot of that stuff, like, do I have an emergency response person assigned? Well, we can't tell you that. You have to answer that. But the great thing about the templates are they get you started, and they at least get something in place and get you rolling, and I'd be more than happy to send that out or work with people on those. Any others?
I have not gotten any more questions.
Awesome. Okay. Well, if anybody needs any more information, like I said, reach out to me, reach out to Jordan, pretty much anyone here on our side. Be more than happy to follow up with stuff or tell you a little bit more about what we do on the networking group. And I appreciate everybody attending today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.